In this video, we are painting true metallic metal on Space Marines. I'll be using my work-in-progress Deathwatch, but of course you can apply the same techniques to any Space Marine chapter, other faction or game as well. We will be painting 4 different shades of metal. A darker, worn silver for weapons, a shiny and polished silver, in my case for the arms of the Deathwatch, a brass or copper tone for weapon parts and bullet shells, and a shining gold for armor decorations and insignia. Towards the end of the video, we'll also have a stab at adding some depth and definition to cloth and purity seals. My name is Kai, you're watching Brush and Axe, and this is True Metallic Metal for Space Marines. I have my squad partly prepared and painted already. I wanted to keep the metallic paints for the last steps because I wanted to matte varnish the entire model first without dulling down the metallic paints. If you want to see how I got to this stage, there is a playlist with the previous videos in the description. As you can see, I've not yet glued on the shoulder pads. I did that to ease access to the hats and helmets for painting. We're starting off with lead belcher for all the silver parts. You can of course use any mid to dark metallic paint here. I don't want to mess up my prior work on the model, so I start by base coating the back and underside of the shoulder pads and giving the outside a light overbrush with silver, so that the recesses stay mostly black. Once done with that, I glue the shoulder pads onto the model using Tamiya extra thin cement. You can of course use any other plastic glue here. And as I'm doing 2 full squats, I repeat the process a couple of times. I've already done 1 shoulder pad for testing off camera. On the left is where we are right now, and on the right is where we want to get to. So continuing with lead belcher, I move on painting the left arm and any other metal parts I want to be silver. For our sergeant, that includes the bionic arm, weapon, and also the vents on the power pack, as well as some smaller details all around the model, like the helmet and belt buckle. And then I repeat the same process on all remaining models. Maybe worth mentioning here, what I'm showing you is just the way I do it. This might not be the best and certainly not the only way for painting metals. Just taking you along on the ride, showing you what I do and what works well for me, so your mileage may vary. And once done, we should have base coated all silver elements, buckles, weapons, vents, arms, and some small details here and there. In case you wonder why some of the weapons are not painted yet, I'm planning to try some non-metallic metal on the power weapons in the future. Otherwise, I would have also painted the shields and power weapons in silver at this stage. I also check each model and go back whenever I notice a small detail that I've overlooked or forgotten in the first pass. And next we're moving on to liquid talent, also known as non-oil. And I give all silver parts a quick but controlled black wash. This will tone down the overall brightness, but also give us some nice texture and definition. Most details are very small, so we don't need to watch out for pooling too much. I continue with all models, and while the paint is drying, you can already see how the details have come to life and don't stick out like a sore thumb anymore. After letting the non-oil fully dry, I'm moving on to Stormhost Silver to buff and brighten up the shiny areas. I'm taking a flat synthetic brush that I will use to dry brush some of the details, and I look at the model from the top and apply a bright silver dry brush where the light would hit from above, focusing mainly on edges and upward facing areas. And with this step done, we should have buffed up the silver and also retained the shadows we established with the wash in the previous step. Next I'm moving on to Retributor armor. This is a bright gold, and I will be using it on all the details that I want to be very shiny, like the skull on the shoulder pads and insignia around the entire model. I had painted the helmet decoration in gold too, but I wasn't convinced by how it looked. So I went back to lead belcher and changed this part into silver again. The bullet casings also got a shiny gold, but I will change this to a brass color in a second too. Otherwise, I felt the model was a bit too overloaded with too much bright gold. Moving on to Balthasar gold, which is a darker, more brass or copper-like color. I used this for the inside of the belt buckles, picking out some weapon parts, and as mentioned, the bullet casings. And then continue doing the same on all other models. At this stage, we should already see 3 to 4 different tones of metal. We have a bright tone we established with the Stormhost Silver dry brush on the arms, a more muted silver on the weapons from lead belcher, shining gold based on Retributor armor for the decorations, and a darker brassy gold for the more functional parts. But we are not quite done yet. Our gold is also waiting for some definition, so I'm moving on to Strong Tone by the Army Painter. I used to use Agrex's Earthshade a lot in the past, but with one I bought more recently, I felt the recipe had changed and it dries much more shiny than before, so Strong Tone it is. But you could of course use any other brown or sepia wash here. I carefully touch up all the gold details on all models, both shiny and brass. One last check and touching up some details here and there while the paint is still wet on the palette. And with this, the metals should be done. Super simple, super easy. Now if you want to take it even one step further, you could do a final highlight with a 50-50 mix of Retributor armor and Stormhost Silver to give the shiny gold parts an even stronger highlight. I let it all dry overnight and come back the next day to do a bit of work on the cloth and purity seals. First I use Ushabti bone thinned down with a bit of water and base coat the missing skull on the sergeant. We are doing the Duncan here and apply 2 thin coats, maybe even a third one if we're feeling generous. Goal is to achieve full coverage with thin layers of paint. Next, I'm using Soft Tone by the Army Painter and apply a controlled wash to the cloth and skull, as well as all the purity seals, and repeating the process for all models in line. Back to Ushabti bone, this time mixed with a bit of glaze medium. Glaze medium is like thick water. You can use it to reduce the coverage of paint without the paint getting too thin or runny. I apply it to bring back some of the brightness and definition on the cloth and purity seals, each time focusing on sharp corners or areas facing upwards to the light. After the first coat is dry, I come back again to push some of the highlights even further. To introduce some woven cloth texture, I apply some cross-hatching patterns by painting subtle, thin lines first in one direction and then in another. Now we are on to Wraith Bone for the edge highlights. I pick out small details and sharp corners that I want to be the brightest. These are usually the areas that stick out the farthest to the front, back or top, and I give them all a small touch-up. I felt like I pushed the highlights a bit too far on the cloth, so I wanted to strengthen the shadows again to balance that. And apply another coat of wash in select areas, like all the deepest recesses and downward facing shadows. Before we finish up, you might have noticed that some of the models still have visible areas from the superglue that don't blend in too well. To fix this, I apply a quick coat of matte varnish by brush on these particular spots. Once that is dry, the shine has been knocked off and no longer is as pronounced as it was. And now with all of these steps completed, let's have a look at what we got. In a future video, we will finish up the individual chapter shoulder pads for each of the 10 models. So we'll have a look at Ultramarines, Space Wolves, Blood Angels, Howling Griffins, Black Templars, Imperial Fists, and many more. If you liked the video and want to see more, please subscribe and leave a comment. It really helps a lot. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.